I want to ask you now, Dr. Dykes, about hostile changeovers. Abu Mashar wrote at length about that, and you translated his thoughts as far as what happens when we have a chain of hostile or malefic planets or time lords that are handing over rulership for the period of time. Now, my question to you is, as a practicing astrologer, I see clients and I'm like, oh my goodness gracious, they're going through several different time, for the next 27 years, they're going to have malefic time lords. What do we tell the client? What do we do in situations like that? How do we make the best out of that situation?
Well, the first thing to remember is that when you have a client, you shouldn't be shy about recognizing problems that they're already having or have had in the past. Usually, because there's so many people want to stick to the positive, that many clients feel despair because no one's recognizing the real problems that they're having. Right. So we shouldn't be afraid to address these issues. Secondly, malefic planets and malefic configurations, sometimes there's nothing you can do about them. But sometimes malefics can give us, can be beneficial to us. They can be helpful. They can give us leadership qualities, especially if we decide to personally take charge of those malefics in our lives. Again, we can't control everything. But if you are having a martial period and the response should not be to hide quivering in your room. The response should be to address issues of anger in your life, formulate a plan, be honest with yourself about risks that you take, so that it will be a martial period, but you are not a victim, and you certainly don't have to be a victim. Your life happens because you're the one living it. So sometimes we do have to give bad news. But I'll tell you, if I could, an example of a client of mine where at first I thought, oh, geez, what am I going to tell him? Because what I found was I think 6 of his planets were in detriment or fall, which is a bad condition to be in. Although he had some receptions between them that kind of mitigated that. And when a planet is in dissension or fall or detriment, it often means that things don't work out the way that you want, you don't get recognition, or ventures that you enter into kind of fall apart or take a lot of work to keep together. So I was looking at a chart that just said disintegration all over the place. So I was thinking about what to say to him. And he said that he was in a job, successful job, but it involved him traveling all over the world. And he would have short contracts of maybe 2 years in this place, then he would move to another country, worked for 1 year, and so on. But he was worried because of all these planets in detriment and fall. That meant change. So he was calling me up worried. And I said, well, but do you like this job? Do you like the change that it gives you? And he says, actually, I love it. I said, well, then this is not a problem. The chart is describing that things don't last long and there will be lots of change. But if you're the kind of person who can handle that, then this chart is something that works very well for you, even though detriment and fall are normally bad things for most people. So some of it involves asking the person what they really want, and you might find out that a malefic planet or some planet in detriment is not really contrary to the kinds of things they want.
One of the reasons why I like to promote your work so much and encourage people to read your books is because it leads one to other translators and other philosophers like James Holden and Robert Schmidt, etc. And in doing that, I learned about this relationship between matter and form, what the translators called Hule and Idon. Or IDOS. Mm-hmm. I just remember the word. And so I wanted to ask you, Dr. Dykes, if there's a way we could leverage this, because allow me to recount the idea. Let's say we have a system like the Firdaria where Saturn could be ruling a larger period, and he'll have a sub-period ruler. The idea being that the matter of Saturn is offered up to take the form of the sub-period ruler. So I wanted to get your idea about this. Let's say we have a very challenging period that we have to get through. Is there any way, let's say we have a Mars as the major time lord, and is there any way we can take the negative matter and find some positive form to offer it up to another time lord, for example, like with the Fiat Aurea, if that makes sense? It's a rather complicated concept. You see where I'm going with this?
No, it makes sense. Now, they did not use that language, but it can be a helpful thing. If a major time lord is like a kind of flexible matter or a general theme, that word eidos is actually Plato's word for form or idea, and you could think of it as structure. So if you have a Saturn period, that has general qualities that will describe the period, but it gets structured different ways and becomes specified through the various sublords. So that is a useful way to think about it. So you might have a Saturn period that has certain general qualities that we know from what Saturn means, but it takes on martial events or involves martial people, or Venusian people and Venusian events. I think to find the best periods is sometimes a matter of finding which planets fit really well together, like Jupiter and the Sun fit really well together. Saturn is a little more tricky, but again, this is where we have to go beyond the generic structure that all diurnal people or all lunar people have, and looking at what your chart means. I can think of a specific example. Saturn, Mars. This is in a different technique, but it works very similar. Saturn was the main time lord. Mars was the sublord, or what they call the partnering lord. And so, because Saturn is the general time lord, it shows being alone, gloomy, maybe impoverished, hardworking, all of this kind of thing. Right. Well, during that Mars period, Mars was this sublord or partnering lord. He was in graduate school, and he was alone a lot of the time, working hard, all of these Saturnian things. And he found that because Mars is a travel planet, anciently, he found that people were coming in and out of his life all of the time. There was lots of change and fluctuation. And that was hard. However, Mars was the lord of his ascendant and was in the 10th house, which is that's a situation that shows great ambition. Mm-hmm. And so even though he was lonely, and even though people were moving in and out of his life and he was working hard, he was building a career that he was able to use later. And all that time, he knew that he was fulfilling his ambitions. So if we just looked at Saturn and Mars by themselves, we might think, oh man, this is awful. But if Mars is doing something really important and good in your chart, then mixed with those difficulties will be something very valuable.
Right. That's what makes it all worthwhile.
Pardon?
Oh, that's what makes it all worthwhile, I would imagine. It would be
helping people recognize that too. Which is another interesting feature of Time Lords, that they have expiration dates.
Well, you know what, Dr. Dykes, out of all the authors and notable scholars on this material, you seem to be the most sympathetic toward modern astrologers, and you seem very welcoming to them. Let's say that a modern astrologer or someone trained in modern techniques is listening to this material. What might you say to them to sort of ease them into this? For example, is there any way to fit the outer planets into these Time Lord schemes in any way? That sort of thing. Into
the Time Lord schemes, I don't think so. simply because they are based on principles of rulership that the outer planets don't fit into. I do know that some of my traditional friends who are professionals do use the outer planets, but they really restrict what they can do. For example, they won't let Uranus rule Aquarius. He has no rulership there. Instead, Uranus becomes kind of like a fast-moving fixed star. So, for example, if Uranus is in the 11th, that doesn't mean anything. But if Uranus was on the cusp of the 11th, well, that would mean something. So they give the outer planets really tight orbs and no rulerships. So we kind of restrict their meanings. Actually, I think one of the best pieces of advice that any curious modern person could try out is take 6 months and take the outer planets out of all the charts that you cast. And for many people, that's very scary. So, all right, try it for 3 months. You can put them back when you're done. But I promise you that you will suddenly become reacquainted with planetary meanings and house rulerships that normally an addiction to the outer planets completely obscures.
Yeah, I agree. I tried it, and it was easy to break my addiction to the outer planets. And now that I come back to study them, I learn a lot more about them. But as we come into the end of our interview here, Dr. Dykes, I wanted to ask you what you have on your schedule these days. For example, are you accepting clients these days, or does your schedule permit it? Not permit it, rather.
I'm going to start taking clients again in 2015. I needed to take some time off to finish some projects, but I'll start taking them again in 2015. And in 2015, I'm going to start releasing my Arabic series along with some other things. I have a whole series of Arabic manuscripts that I'm working on. And hopefully by the end of the summer, we'll also see a new book from Greek, the existing works of Theophilus of Edessa, who was really the last Greek-speaking astrologer, and he died in the 700s. So he represents the end of the tradition and the transition over to the Arabs in a certain sense. And he wrote on military astrology.
Your reach into this field is... your reach into this field is absolutely amazing and comprehensive. I marvel at your ability to translate the Latin, and also the Arabic had to have been quite difficult. In reading over this literature, I had to hazard a guess, which tradition would you say offers the richest body of lore dealing with Time Lords? Or are they all equal in that regard, would you say?
I guess I want to say the Arabic period. So we're talking about, the Arabic period and early medieval period, because the early medievals were translating the Arabs. There's all sorts of Time Lord material in Vedius Valens, an ancient Greek writer. He has a huge book with Time Lord systems that we don't even quite understand, much less not having tried them. But he was only one author, and he was not very influential on the rest of the tradition. So if people want to learn about Time Lords, the people who talk about them the most are the Arabs and Persians and early medieval Latins.
Let me ask you real quickly, Dr. Dykes, is there any application for perfections in Time Lord systems in horary astrology, purely divinatory, asking a question astrology? Am I going to get this money, or am I going to get this person, etc.?
I can't think offhand of anyone using profections for that. Usually what they do is they look at transits, or they look at the number of degrees between two planets, and they turn that into a number, into a unit of time. I can't think of seeing profections in a horary chart, but I'm sure someone's done it.
Wow, Dr. Dykes, we have covered an amazing amount of material this evening. You have expressed some very complicated ideas quite lucidly and cogently. We can find you at bendykes.com. We can pick up all your books from there, right? You also have a Logos and Light lecture series that I think people might be interested in. And also, if you're interested in this material and find it a little mind-boggling, I highly recommend Traditional Astrology for Today, which is extremely illuminating, both as to the technical ends of what we're talking about and also dealing with the philosophy behind it. So please elaborate a little bit more, Dr. Dykes. How can we get your books? How can we contact you if we need you, etc.?
You can find my books on Amazon. You can also go to bendykes.com. I have a lot of audio workshops, audio lectures, and my email is also on my webpage. If I could just say one quick word about Traditional Astrology for Today, because you've mentioned that. It's a short book of about 100 to 125 pages, and I specifically designed it for curious modern people who just want to get their toes wet, who don't want to have to make a big financial or time commitment to learn a little bit more what is all this traditional stuff about and why are people excited about it. So that would be a good place to start if you're just curious and want to see what's going on. I think the longest chapter is maybe 5 pages, and I designed it that way, and I would recommend that as a starting place.
Let me just add that I've been studying astrology for quite a bit, and I continually go back to, and I've reread Traditional Astrology for Today, so it has a lot to offer both the beginner and someone who's not a beginner. Well, Dr. Dykes, unfortunately, we have run out of time. I want to thank you very much for joining us this evening.
Well, thanks for having me. It's been a great pleasure.
Hey, happy holidays to you, Dr. Dykes. We'll chat with you later.
You too. Sounds good. Bye.